Hello everyone, I guess hopefully you're having a wonderful day, and today we are here with a video comparing soccer cards to the big four sports in America, that is NBA, MLB, NFL, and what is unpictured, which is hockey. Sadly, I couldn't really fit hockey in this thumbnail and make it look all that nice, so I had to go ahead and leave it out, but don't hate me for that, just do what I gotta do. Nonetheless, we'll talk about sort of the process in which I am going to compare, but first we'll sort of talk about why I decided to do this from a soccer perspective. First is that soccer sort of the stepchild in all this. The other four sports have had much more of a, I guess you could say, organic collecting growth in a sense, because in my opinion, the most fundamental reason is that all these sports are either based in America or North America is where they primarily happen, and thus you sort of have a smaller area in which all this collecting takes place. It makes it much easier for it to be much more of a community, and soccer's a global thing, so there's been pockets of this happening everywhere, which goes to my next point: most viewed sport in the world and possibly the most collected in terms of sticker books across the globe. Every World Cup comes along, it's the best-selling thing in the world in terms of collecting, and how many packets are distributed, because stickers are relatively cheap. It's relatively doable for almost anyone, and if you want to partake, you definitely can. And finally, soccer barely gets any hobby buzz. I guess that sort of goes back to the stepchild thing, but in the hobby space, we're sort of just an afterthought, and for me, it's interesting to compare up, because I think soccer is probably, if not one of the sports with the most potential, in the sense that you could convert viewers into collectors at a much larger degree, because it really doesn't take many people to make a massive change in terms of soccer, since, like we mentioned before, it's just not really that collected. So the experiment that I'll be sharing with today is going to go as follows. I'll take the top 5 best players in each of the sports. I'll go ahead and take their iconic rookie card, or at least what I think is their iconic rookie card. I will have to take some liberties with, like, say, an old baseball player. There will be some instances, I think it's only 1 or 2, where you have to take a later card, since the earlier ones just aren't that plentiful and you really don't have many comps. Nonetheless, we'll compare cost of the cards along with the populations, and this will be, like I said earlier, across the top 5 sports. So that will be soccer, hockey, football, basketball, and baseball. Of course, American lean here. There are other big sports in the world, I get it, but just bear with me. One thing before we get into it: don't bother debating the top 5. I mean, you can in the comments if you want, but don't yell at me, I guess, because I just went to Google, searched up some lists, and sort of took what I could. I wasn't making these lists up on my own or for any particular sort of reason. It was just sort of what I was able to find. So we're going to start with soccer, naturally, since that's what most of us are here for. If you're not here for soccer, I respect it, but we'll get to all the sports as we go. Number 5 in soccer is Johan Cruyff. As you'll see, and as we go through this, basically, I take the middle grade, which is how we sort of get a median price point on these, and I take the median grade in terms of population as well. So here we have a PSA 3. In total, there are 8 of them. I don't really put this on screen the whole time, but during some of the later ones, I mean, most of the later ones, soccer isn't on card ladder much, but on the card ladder stuff, you can easily see what the pop is. With the PSA site that I have here, it's a little bit harder, to be fair. This is a pop 8, and the middle price that we have here is $3,100. Number 4 in soccer is the 2002 Mega Cracks Ronaldo. Mid-grade here is a PSA 6, and the last sale for this one was $25.20. At number 3, we have Maradona. This is his 77 crack Pog. I did sort of consider maybe taking the 78 crack, which has him on a bit more of a universal style of card/sticker, and I think that one's really preferred as well, but I just decided to go with what is the true rookie in terms of year. You can debate it if you want. I do think that that's something soccer probably has a little bit more of an issue with than some of the other sports, is that we're less defined on what the rookie is. I'd say for some of the bigger guys, like the guys we're showing here, it's a bit more defined, but as you sort of branch out, there are those questions. Nonetheless, a PSA 3 went for $4,800, so that is the price point on Maradona. Pele, this is one that, the hobby seems to have agreed on. Back in the day, it wasn't the Alifa, but now that sort of is the case, so this is the 1958 Alifa Boulaget. A PSA 3 is the mid-grade, and the last one of this went for $21,000. That's actually one of the higher prices you'll see throughout this entire list, which is pretty impressive considering it's soccer, but you also have to consider it's a Pop 12, so that definitely plays a factor in this. And then finally, we have Lionel Messi. So this is a PSA 6, which is the middle grade. Sometimes the pictures on the left won't match what the middle grade is. Don't really bother yourself with that. It's not a big deal. I still took all the data based off of the middle grade. So PSA 6 here goes at $3,150. So tallying that all on up, here we have a total cost of $35,000 to attain the 5 premier rookie cards of the top 5 players in soccer. And most importantly, I average out the pop between all 5. I add them up, divide by 5, and the average pop across these is 49. Don't really have much to add until we see some more stats in here, so let's go ahead and do that. For basketball, number 5, we have a mix. You could choose Larry Bird or Magic. It really depends on what you want to do there. But the middle grade for this Topps 1980 sticker is, I think, that's a card. I'm stuck in soccer terms. Nonetheless, PSA 7 goes for $1,200 and is a pop 4,017. Pretty plentiful, especially in that grade. As you can see, it's a pop like 15, 16,000 total, something like that. And number 4, we have Bill Russell here, his 1957 Topps. This last sold for $5,700 and is a pop 238, so a much lower pop, but also a much higher price point. Number 3 is Lou Alcindor or Kareem. This is a pop 869 and a PSA 5, and the current price point is $1,000 on the dot. And number 2, we have LeBron James. Now, this is one where it gets a little interesting because while the Topps Chrome 2003 is sort of the card you think of, and it's the base card, I would say, for LeBron, he does have parallels, which is also worthy of note. There will be, I don't even know, maybe another example throughout this, but there's not many examples of a modern player with parallels on this sort of list, which makes it a lot easier to compare. The issue being here with LeBron is you also have refractors, you have his black refractor, X-fractor, gold, all this stuff. I don't know if gold's correct. It might be. Don't quote me on that. But basically, there are tons of parallels and also tons of different products. So while I am comparing to this one card, it's not as cut and dry as it is with a lot of other sports. So, $1,100, or I guess at least at this point, it's $1,078. It's a pretty low price point for LeBron, but that's because we went for, the more common card. I thought it was fair, but at the same time, again, like I mentioned, it's not going to be perfect. And then at number 1, of course, we have the 1986 Fleer Michael Jordan. Some people now debate, the 84 star. I don't, believe that to be his real rookie, like the rookie, but I could understand why you might think that. Nonetheless, here a PSA 7 is the mid-grade, and that means that we are looking at a price point of about $4,500. All in all, that means for basketball, we are looking at a price point of $13,500 for an average pop of $2,700. Of course, here, and this is sort of a spoiler for later, soccer does actually have a pretty high total cost at $35,000. That's 2 to 3x what basketball is. But of course, again, with basketball, you're getting a much, much higher pop. On average, this is like 50x what the pop is for soccer. So, the total cost should be a bit lower, I would assume. Also, in addition, like I mentioned with LeBron, his Topps Chrome base card isn't necessarily the one everyone's hunting. Like with these other cards, you might be hunting higher grades, but you're still hunting the same card. Parallels are pretty similar, but also add another element. So something worth noting. For football at number 5, we have Walter Payton. This is a PSA 6, which has a total pop of $2,320, and the current price point is $380. At number 4, we have Joe Montana's 1981 Topps. This is a PSA 8, but we actually took the PSA 7 pricing. For some reason, Card Ladder didn't have a PSA 7 in there. Find that interesting considering, 7,300 copies of this exist. Probably a card you'd want to have in your database, but nonetheless, last price point on this was about $180. Obviously, as you'll sort of note here, some of these pops are really, really high, so the price point is going to, of course, sort of match that and be relatively low compared to how good these players are. You sort of see that balance out a bit. Say, for example, here with Jim Brown, he has a total pop of, what is that, like 5,600 in PSA grades, but this PSA 5 has 850 in total and has a price point of about $1,500 to $1,600. At number 2, we have Jerry Rice, again another example of a really, really low cost card because of the total pop. So this PSA 7 goes for $72 there and about, and has a total pop of $10,500. And then finally, of course, we have Tom Brady and his 2000 Bowman Chrome. Again, another player where you could argue for some different cards because there's the refractor. I don't know if there's numbered stuff. I guess I would imagine there is. I know he definitely has like numbered autos and autograph rookie cards and all that fun stuff. So again, just because we're looking at his base card doesn't mean we're necessarily taking into account his super high-end stuff. Say, for example, that you miss out on in some of these other sports that we'll talk about, like baseball. Baseball doesn't have any of that sort of stuff going on since that's all prior to that being a thing in the hobby. Same thing also for hockey. And yeah, I mean, you know, it happens on end here in football and basketball, but just something to be accounted for. So here in football, this has the lowest cost we've seen so far at $4,400, but also you have to, you know, sort of account that the average pop is double that of basketball, which was, you know, almost 50x that of soccer. So the average pop here is about 100 times as plentiful as the average soccer card that we were looking at earlier. And of course, the total cost, you know, represents that with the total cost here actually being lower than the average pop. Then we move on to baseball. This one, at least in my opinion, is going to be the closest, or, you know, maybe hockey as well, but they're going to be the closest that you can go to actually comparing to soccer in terms of kind of eras, but also total population. So we start with the 1939 play ball Ted Williams. This is a pop 173 and a PSA 4, and the price point on the last one to sell was $8,000. Number 4 in baseball, this actually initially for me was Ty Cobb on the list I was looking at, but Mickey Mantle was number 6, and Ty Cobb's rookies are just so hard to pin down. Because there's one true one, but then there's a few other ones from early years, but none of them really had that many sales or, you know, that much of a pop. So it was just too incredibly hard to actually be able to get some good data. So I just swapped in the Mickey Mantle. Despite being at number 6, I figured, you know, in terms of baseball card collecting, this card definitely deserves to be in the top 5 somewhere, and so it felt right. I put this in at number 4 since I was just swapping the players out and they were relatively close. The middle grade here is a PSA 3, and as you can see, there are 197 of them. Do keep in mind, I didn't mention this before, but up here where all this pop is going on, I do cut it off early, so there are PSA 1s, Authentics, 1.5s, all that fun stuff. So just because this looks towards the end and it doesn't add up right, if you actually go and look at all of it, it will. But the middle grade here is a PSA 3, and the last sale here was $81,000. At number 3, we then have a 54 Topps Henry Aaron, or Hank Aaron, in a PSA 4. So this is a total pop of nearly $1,100, and the price point currently at $3,400. At number 2 in baseball, we have Willie Mays. Again, I just looked up this list online, so if you have any issue with it, you know, don't throw them my way. Don't blame me. Nonetheless, this isn't as sought after a card in the 52 set. Of course, Mickey Mantle's sort of the one that's gotten the spotlight. I have my reasons for wondering why that would be, but I think it's pretty obvious. If you know, you know. Nonetheless, this PSA 4 last sale was $7,450 and has a pop of almost $500. At number 1, we have Babe Ruth. I chose his 1933 Gowdy. Yes, it's not his rookie, but again, sort of a much easier example of the Ty Cobb scenario that I was running into, where his true rookies are just so hard to sort of figure out and pin down that you're really just going to go with like the first card that's still, you know, relatively early, but also widely desirable and really well known. Keep in mind there are other Gowdies, so this isn't the only Gowdy, which is also, you know, a factor, but it's the one that I chose, and I felt it made sense. So this comes in at a total pop of $185, and the last sale was near about $12,000. Taking a look here for baseball, that puts us at a total cost of $112, almost $113,000, and an average pop of $424. Like I mentioned before, I think it's the closest to baseball and definitely seems to be thus far in terms of population. Meanwhile, the price is definitely much higher, which, you know, I totally understand. Baseball has much more of a history, all these cards. I mean, I'm not even a baseball guy. I've seen, I would say all these, yeah, I'm pretty familiar with all these cards, to be honest. Same thing goes for all these cards on the list, to be honest. I've seen them all. I mean, Walter Payton might have been the only one that I wasn't totally sure of, but other than that, These all have some, pretty decent hobby legacies. Meanwhile, I think if you showed this Johan Cruyff to the average hobbyist, they probably don't know what that is. And so that's definitely something that is, just worth mentioning. And then we go on to hockey. So at number 5, we have a Jágr O-Pee-Chee. I chose the O-Pee-Chee in the scenarios where there were tops or non-tops because O-Pee-Chee seems to be the preferred, considering it's the Canadian release. Here I chose a PSA 10, mostly because I didn't want to, if you look, it's a pop 12,200, lots of 10s, lots of 9s, but if I would have chosen it as a 9, essentially, it's not that big of a difference, it's like $100, but it would have really skewed the average total pop, not in favor of hockey, and I don't want to do that over $100 difference, that didn't really seem fair, so I chose a PSA 10, it's $150, $160 for this PSA 10 pop 3700. And number 4 in hockey, we have a Gordie Howe. This is a 1951 Parkhurst. I've definitely seen this before in my distanced sort of viewing of hockey within the hobby. This is a PSA 3 mid-grade, comes in at $6,100. At number 3 in hockey, we have a Mario Lemieux. This is a 1985 O-Pee-Chee. A PSA 7 is a pop 1,203, and the current price point is a little over $370. Number 2 in hockey, we have a Bobby Orr. This is a PSA 4 of his 1966 Topps. Total pop coming in at $176 and costing it near $5,000 at the most recent sale. And then, of course, at number 1, we have the 1979 O-Pee-Chee Wayne Gretzky. I chose a PSA 5, that being the mid-grade here, a pop 1,615, and also a price point of 1,615. I guess last current sale was 1,600. Up here it says 1,615. That's because Card Ladder sort of adjust the last sale to where their index is compared to the last index, and so it's just sort of accounting for that. But I took 1,600 as the last sale. So rounding it all up, at the bottom we have hockey at a total cost of $13,000 and an average pop of $1,300, or thereabouts $1,300. I'll compare across all of these. To be honest, it's really, really difficult since a lot of these numbers are so different that, you really have to take a lot of liberties. Something that is notable here, I think, is that basketball is very comparable with football and hockey in the sense that basketball's average pop right here is 2,700. Football's average pop is double that of basketball's, and hockey's average pop is half that of basketball's. So, being half and double the pop is, at least close enough to where you can draw some conclusions, right? I was generally impressed with where hockey stood on this, total cost being $13,000, very similar to basketball, of course, half the pop on average. But I wouldn't have expected that considering basketball's sort of, meteoric rise we saw throughout the last cycle. Part of that, I think, is basketball, they don't really go back. Like, basketball guys, sure, some of them are going after the Larry Bird, some of them are going after the Bill Russells, some of them are going after the Kareem, but few and far between compared to what the modern guys are chasing. I would have expected football to be a bit higher, but of course, when you have, like the Joe Montana and Jerry Rice's being as high pop as they are, it's just so incredibly difficult to hold a good price point on those. And so I can sort of understand why they don't. What I found crazy is that soccer actually is number 2 in terms of total cost. I would have expected that to be lower, but of course, when you sort of factor in the average pop being 49, that is so far and away different than every other sport on this list. I talked about how basketball and football and hockey were relatively close, being 50% more, 50% less, double, whatever. They're at least, within the realms of each other. Soccer is a whole scaling multiple down from baseball. Baseball, these are all, really old cards. Obviously the tops in 52, 54, yada, yada. Those are going to be decently pop, but that's still tops in the 50s. And we have a Gaudi in there, we have the play ball, and that average pop is 424 in the mid-grade. Soccer is 49. That is a tenth as much. And I know for a while, a lot of people in soccer were relatively scared of pops because they didn't know really how much was going to come out. But when you have a total cost of these rookies being as high as it is, you're going to eventually get to a point where you can trust pops a bit more. And I think we're getting there. Not to say that the pops in soccer are anywhere near done. I'd say the pops in soccer are lower than they should be compared to all the other sports in the sense that they still have a long ways to go. We're taking cards or stickers or pogs, whatever it may be, from all over the world, sending it to PSA, which is in America, and then sending it back or wherever it has to go. A lot more difficult than, say, sending a Topps card that's already in America that a collector already knows has a ton of value. So you do have to assume that the soccer pops, at least relative to itself will grow the most out of all these, but at the same time, even if it grows the most out of all these, I mean, it's still so much lower than baseball and not even comparable with really any of the other sports. I think there's a ton of fun stuff that you could take away from this. I could talk about it forever, but I don't want to be too excited about soccer, but this does sort of go back and show, at least to me, why I am so excited about collecting soccer cards and some of these, rare rookies. I only have the 71 bits. I don't even have the other 4, if I'm being honest. Like, I have different rookies for those guys, but that's also one of the problems with soccer is, you have debates in terms of what's the rookie or, what people really like. Like, say, for instance, with Ronaldo, he has a sticker that same year. Do you prefer the card or the sticker? Who knows? While, say, in these other sports, you probably only have one release people really care about. So that also has to play a factor. Same thing for Cruyff. He has a Sicker Verlag, which is actually a year earlier, but doesn't look as appealing. So, people have to sort of debate that amongst themselves. And Pele has a ton of 58. So Pele is sort of a special case, but the Alifa seems to be head and shoulders above the other items, at least for, how much pop it has in terms of total market cap. So I think soccer rookie cards definitely have the most debate still to be done in terms of which ones are the ones. So I do think that holds us back a little bit, but generally the numbers, at least to me, are pretty impressive. I'm relatively impressed by what the average cost is. It felt higher than I would have imagined, but I'm also impressed at how low the pops are compared to the other sports, because I sort of had an idea, but I've never seen it like this. And so to hammer this home before we go ahead and head on out of here, in terms of final thoughts, the first one is that soccer pops are just so incredibly low. Like I mentioned, I knew they were low, but I've never sat down and compared them to other sports like that and really saw what the difference was. So it definitely makes me understand why some things in soccer still might hold really, really high prices, despite their counterparts in other sports being, pennies on the dollar comparatively, but also having, say 100 times the population. Like I said, price was higher than I expected, but if I would have known the pops going into it and comparatively how that played out, I might have been a bit more understanding of that. I do think that there's exponential potential in soccer when we sort of talk about this type of stuff. If we look backwards, basically, the total cost averages for this stuff would have been so insanely high compared to soccer if I would have taken the super high grades, right? Say, for instance, this Fleer Jordan right here, it's a pop 300 something in a PSA 10. That thing's like 200,000. So that would have dwarfed baseball entirely. That would have dwarfed everything on this list if you start taking the high grades and the really, really low pop. Same thing with every other sport. If I would have taken the high grades in baseball or whatever would have got you to the total pop of an average of 49 in these other sports would have made the total cost price points look so incredibly high. I would imagine in baseball, you're probably getting into the millions. In basketball, you're probably getting close to the millions. In football, you're getting up there. And in hockey, you're probably getting up there as well. I think they all would have been in the 100,000s to millions range, while soccer still would have been down here at 35,000. So if I would have adjusted for the total pop of them, it would have looked insane and soccer would have been dwarfed. But I also would have felt it's unfair to do that too, because we have to go off what we know now, right? But I do think there's exponential potential in that sense, that the soccer pops, are just so incredibly low at 49 on average for those cards. You can imagine it doesn't take many buyers to send that up in price. And so I'd feel it's much more likely that those would go up than something with an average pop of, say, 3,000. Now, of course, I'm just a guy on the internet screaming random things at my microphone. I offer no financial advice. And yeah, I'm just a crazy human on the internet. So, don't take anything I say as gospel. And then finally, I put that the results were respectable, but not overly respectable. I didn't think that it made soccer look like some outstanding, sport within the hobby landscape. But I did feel that, within reason, it made us look pretty good. I thought that the total cost was decent enough to make us look like we actually compete, but the average pop is so low that it might look appealing depending on which side of the fence you're on. But yeah, overall I had fun with it. It was something that, I was sort of thinking about something I would want to do for myself, but being able to share with you guys makes it all the better. So that's going to be it for this video comparing soccer to the major US sports in terms of GOAT-esque players and their rookie cards. If you enjoyed the video, do make sure to leave a like. It means a lot to me, helps the channel. Would love to hear your thoughts down below if you have any you'd want to share. And if you want to see more videos like this as soon as I go live, make sure to subscribe. But with that said, hopefully you have a wonderful day, and peace.